Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Sprackling Podcast. I am a woman on a mission to assemble a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing, a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. To gain that understanding, I am mining the intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy to make you a better writer. This is episode number 40, Determining Your Character Profile, Your Pinnacle Traits. We have been going through the different levels of awareness of certain character traits in the course of our lives to see if we can just play around with setting up our own character profile diagram. And we're in the first phase of this. This is the last day of the first phase of this, where we're setting up our stories. So what is a pinnacle trait, and how would we know if we have one? One of the simplest ways of determining whether or not a trait is a pinnacle trait for you is to think about the people that you know pretty well, someone that you really admire, and someone that has a trait about them that you just think is just so wonderful and very valuable. But you look at yourself and you say, not me. I just don't have that one at all. That could well be a pinnacle trait. Another way of finding a pinnacle trait would be just by thinking of what good traits might there be to have, and are any that are totally missing from my repertoire that maybe I haven't even thought about? That would be a pinnacle trait as well. Now, the challenge with writing a story around a pinnacle trait is that the pinnacle traits are the ones that we don't even think of. So how on earth are we going to have a story to go with the trait that we never even think of? Well, that's why I began with having you think of a person whom you admire, who has a trait that you think is very wonderful, that sadly you don't see a trace of in yourself. So your story in that occasion is going to be, what is the earliest time in your recollection that you can remember admiring that trait in another person and thinking to yourself, oh, not me. So pause the video and think of your trait and write a little story of the first time that you remember noticing that trait exists and realizing that it just wasn't part of your life. Go ahead and pause. Did you write your story? Terrific. Now we've got the second story that we're going to write about this trait. I want you now to think of the most recent time that you were aware of that same trait in another person and wishing that you kind of had it for yourself. So pause the video again and come up with your second story about the same trait. Did you write your second story? Terrific. Now be sure to label both of those stories with the word pinnacle trait to remind yourself that this is the trait that you're capturing. And what we will do beginning tomorrow is we'll begin looking for names to go with the stories. And that should be a lot of fun because we're going to explore different possibilities and we're going to travel down several different paths. And because we could end up going many different directions, it will take us a few days to cover all of the possibilities, and you might want to work each of your traits simultaneously, or else you can just come back through the videos one at a time. We can figure probably, I would say, at least 4 days on this, and maybe a little longer depending on how much time it takes us to do the individual, break it all the way down to the individual trait. So please join me tomorrow to begin putting names to those traits. And in the meantime, so as promised, I'm continuing with my story about how I came to be creating a 35-lesson course on this material and what I ended up being surprised about when I created it. The interesting thing to me that occurred was that I found out that, yes, it did work very well for being able to pick up where you left off in a story emotionally, along with where to pick it off with the thread of the story, which we covered using a note box. But there was something else that showed up very, very quickly, and that was that using the character profile diagram that we're playing with right now in this series, it would be possible to trace out development in personality of our key players. It's very interesting that our hero will typically undergo some kind of transformation in their character profile diagram. Just as we have now finished talking about the different levels of awareness, we found out very early on that when you're looking at a hero's journey, you're really also not just a physical journey or a geographical journey or an object discovery journey or a knowledge discovery journey. A hero's journey is very much a personal development journey as well. That is my corner of the world. I'll leave it to Victoria Crowder and others to go through the plot points. That's not my area. But very interestingly, what we discover is that our hero has to make a character profile transition where they take their strengths, the things that are in their zone of being, their zone of stability, their zone of awareness, and use those to begin to make inroads on the zone of chaos, the wing traits from the zone of chaos, and ultimately, at the high point of the story, the pinnacle traits come within the grasp of the hero. And that is very, very exciting outgrowth. But even that wasn't the beginning, was not the end of what people found. And what people really found with the class was that the weeks, because we spent a whole week on each individual character trait, that people were asking themselves some questions about themselves and their history and their patterns growing up. And people found that it was a wonderful springboard for journaling, for taking a voyage of self-discovery and discovering very, very productive questions for journaling. I know entire books have been written on questions to help you journal. You know, what type of neighborhood did you live in? What kind of a car did you drive? And all of these things that could trigger memories. And they're lovely. They're excellent sources. But this seemed to hit on something that the other books didn't touch on. Something that went a little bit deeper and touched a little bit more foundationally into how we make our own decisions. And this just has to be totally at a hobby level because I teach fiction writing. But there isn't anyone who reads fiction who isn't well aware that many a truth is told in fiction, and many tale of growth has helped the readers in sometimes far more than any overtly self-help books. So in that spirit, that's why we're playing around with seeing if we can create for ourselves what our own character profile diagram might look like. So the next step tomorrow. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.